Hello, friends. Good afternoon. Namaskar to all of you. Very warm welcome to the 14th virtual discourse. We are very happy to see all of you here. I welcome our keynote speaker today, Madam Sobaida Mani, who has joined us from the United States. Good morning to you and to other friends who have joined from the other parts of the world. I also welcome the former speakers, the other eminent guests that we have, and other dear friends. We are extremely grateful to all of you for making time and joining our discourse. And as you know, that this program is solely for the purpose of raising awareness and education. So we are extremely grateful to you. As always, we start our programs with a couple of prayers, and we seek the blessings of Almighty in order to create a tranquil ambience here and a soothing effect on all those who are in distress and disillusionment. Prayers are having immense effect on the human soul. So therefore, we will be having a couple of prayers. First, I will request Adib to play the prayer on the computer, and it will be followed by two other prayers, which will be by Mrs. Nima. I don't see the other friend. 1 minute. Miss Priyambada, are you there? Cannot see you. Okay, so we will have two prayers. The first prayer will be played by Adib, and the second prayer will be chanted by Mrs. Nima. Adib, please.
Oh God, my God, aid thou thy trusted servants to have loving and tender hearts. Help them to spread amongst all the nations of the earth the light of guidance that cometh from the company on high. Verily, thou art the strong, the powerful, the mighty, the all-subduing, the ever-giving. Verily, thou art the generous, the gentle, the tender, the most bountiful.
वरदे वरदे हे परमेश्वर वरदे एकता की ज्योति सारी पृथ्वी पर छा जाए साम्राज्य प्रभु का है यह भाव सभी देश प्रदेश और जनमानस की ललाट पर अंकित हो जाए।
Thank you very much for the prayers, Mrs. Nima, for your beautiful prayer. So, dear friends, I welcome you once again to the 14th Virtual Discourse. I welcome once again Madam Sohaida Damani, who have joined us from the United States with our keynote speaker today. Dear friends, you know that these programs we hold usually monthly and at times bi-monthly, and these programs are organized by the members of the Baha'i community. And as we have mentioned earlier, these programs focus mainly on the focus on awareness side, education of the people, and we focus on the social and contemporary issues. Why the Baha'is organize such programs? Well, the primary and fundamental goal of the Baha'i community, is oneness of God, oneness of mankind, and oneness of religions. And we believe that through education, awareness, and raising the capacity, spiritual capacity of the people, we can achieve our goals. This is a small initiative in this direction. We are truly grateful to receive a lot of support from the friends for the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time. We are delighted to inform you that the recordings of these discourses are already on the YouTube, and you can watch them as per your convenience. I will show the channel and share the link in the chat box. You can visit as per your convenience and watch the earlier discourses. Your kind support will expand the circle of participation, and it will be helpful to enrich the understanding of the people on various issues that we have been discussing here. As you know, that right understanding on the social issues will make people conscious on their God-given potential and responsibility towards our children, our future generations, and our common future. Those of you who are joining for the first time, please do share your emails and contacts in the chat box to invite you again and for future communications. Before we introduce the subject and the keynote speaker today, I will take a few minutes just to introduce the activities of the Baha'i communities for the benefit of those who are joining for the first time. As I mentioned earlier, these programs are organized by the members of the Baha'i community, and Baha'is are probably the most organized body of people on this planet. It can be well regarded as a microcosm of the human race. The basic tenets of the Baha'i faith are, as I mentioned earlier, oneness of God, oneness of religions, and oneness of mankind. The Baha'i communities are present and active in serving society in almost all the countries of the world. The Baha'is work relentlessly towards serving the society and the betterment of mankind. The Baha'i community tries its best to focus on the educational aspect of the people, to enrich the understanding through education and training programs in various countries of the world. The Baha'is believe that human beings are noble, their souls are rich in gems of inestimable value, and education will be able to, unravel those treasures latent therein. Human beings are the highest creation of the Almighty. Their creation is distinct from all other forms of life. They have the power of intellect, and they can segregate the truth from the falsehood. So our effort is to raise awareness, enrich the understanding, so that people can make the right decisions and to contribute to the betterment of society. As you know, that ignorance and inadequate understanding on the primary issues of life, the concepts related to human life and its existence, are among the prime causes that causes the prejudices and contributes to social ills. Therefore, we organize these programs on crucial issues that affect our life to get the right perspective. Our purpose is to inspire positive consciousness that the individuals become responsible for their own growth and contribute towards the growth of others. The Baha'i community, as I mentioned earlier, undertakes thousands of educational initiatives across the world for moral education of children and young adults, and study sessions for adults to build unifying visions in them in order to work for a common future for all of us. The programs we organize are participatory in nature. We intend to we intend to hear everyone and involve everyone in the educational process that we undertake, starting from our family members to those living in the neighborhoods. Each of us, as I mentioned earlier, are responsible to build our common future. Therefore, we wish to consult, work together, create love and harmony, a unifying vision in everyone in order to contribute to a better society, one world, one family. Let us transform our outdated way of thinking, cultivate holistic understanding of the concepts that relates to human life, understand the real purpose of human life, and enhance our capacity to serve and build vibrant communities around us. On this note, with this note, I would like to request all of you to actively participate in today's discourse. Raise your hands to speak. Please publicize these small programs to wider society. Invite your friends and family and help this modest initiative. Let us work together for a better future for our children and future generations. Dear friends, the title of our discourse today, The Imperative of Justice and Indispensable Compass in Individual and Social Life. In other words, in layman's language, the necessity of justice in individual and collective life. Why have we chosen this subject? Dear friends, justice is very dear to human beings. Unfortunately, our society hasn't been able to dispense justice to all its members. The flaws in the prevailing social order are conspicuous. We can see everywhere, clearly visible as the sunlight. We see social inequalities, violence, anarchy, terrorism, extreme poverty. Millions of people are suffering, exploitation of the environment. And seeing all this, it often we raise questions to ourselves if this is the kind of society that we wish to inherit for our children and for the future generations. The answer is, of course, not. We would love to live in a peaceful and prosperous world. But dear friends, is it fair or responsible on our part that we desire a peaceful world and a prosperous world, but prefer to stay indifferent to human misery? Probably we are too attached to the old way of doing things and to this dilapidated social order. Fortunately, some of us, and there is a rising trend, a positive trend, that many of us are raising their voices against the system. But unfortunately, this effort is not enough to bring about the overall transformation. So what do? We suggest, since all of us are responsible for our common future, to start with, let us observe justice and fairmindedness in our individual lives, in our judgments, interactions, and certainly justice has to be the ruling principle in any decision making. To better understand the issue and to know about our individual responsibilities in this regard, we have invited today Madam Subaida Mani, who is an expert in this subject. She is an international lawyer, an author, a prolific speaker, and an educator par excellence. Madam Subaida is the director of the Center for Peace and Global Governance. She has written 4 books. Let me read the names of those books. Breeze to Global Governance, World Federation, the Key to Solving Global Crisis. Collective Security with Enrich. And the 4th one is The Alchemy of Peace, 6 Essential Shifts in Mindsets and Habits to Achieve World Peace. All of them are available on Amazon to see and purchase. Madam Subaida is a faculty member of the Wilmette Institute in USA and teaches subjects related to social transformation. We are extremely grateful to her to kindly accept our invitation and to address us at this odd hour. It's Sunday early morning in Washington, D.C., and she is ready to address us. Thank you for that, for your kind gesture and support. May I kindly request Madam Subaida to unmute and address us on this crucial subject that relates to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for that very gracious introduction. I'm going to say good morning because it's very early morning here. I'm not a morning person, but it demonstrates my love for you all that I crawled out of bed at 5 this morning so that I could be present here with you. What a delight. Good evening, your time. All right, and Jitin, am I a co-host so I can share a screen at?
Sure, you can.
Wonderful. I just want to begin before I start sharing my screen by thanking you all for being here. I can see some of your faces, most of you, I see your screens, but thank you again for being here. Justice is a very, 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 very broad topic. One of the former members of the House of Justice told us many years ago that he was working on writing a book on justice, and after 20 years he still had not completed it, because as he delved into the subject he just kept finding various angles, and as I delved into the subject, not in as much detail by any stretch of the imagination in preparation for today, I realized what he had been up against. So I will just share with you some reflections today on certain facets of the amazing topic of justice. But first, let me go and share my screen. All right, I think that should do it. So Dr. Mission was very intent that and insistent that I focus really on practical applications of the principle of justice, which is very wise, because otherwise we risk just living in a world of theories, abstract theories that are not, have no practical impact in life. So let's dive into the topic of today, the imperative of justice, an indispensable compass in individual and collective life. Now, our world is clearly in disarray and is being buffeted by the winds of crises, both large and small. As our societal systems disintegrate all around us, our willingness to act really takes on new urgency. We simply cannot afford to be paralyzed by fear, by anxiety, or by despondency. We have to act as never before to solve the problems before us. Action needs to take place on two fronts, because we need to change two things. One is our individual lives, the way we think and the way we behave as individuals, but also our society needs to change. At the moment, our habit as human beings around the world is to attempt to tackle each of the many, many, many hundreds of problems that we have individually. However, the governing body of the Baha'i faith, in a message addressed to the peoples of the world, the promise of world peace in 1985 already, that long ago, suggested and urged that leaders, if they wanted to solve the problems of today, would do well to begin by identifying the principles involved and then applying them methodically to solving the problems at hand. These principles really constitute the glue that make the solutions in the various areas of life congruent with each other, so that when we apply solutions in one area, we're not undermining the work we're doing in another area. In its latest message to the Baha'i world, the same governing body in April of this year said something very interesting that I want to share with you. I will read the quote, but the nub of it is summarized on this slide that you see. They said that until humanity as a whole undertakes to establish its affairs on foundations of justice and truth, two principles that they highlight, it is alas fated to stagger from one crisis to another. So what was fascinating to me is that these are the two principles, and there are many of them, that they've chosen to focus on and identify as key principles that humanity needs to focus on at the moment if we are to transform the reality that we are living, whether we are to tackle problems big and small, whether it's nuclear proliferation, whether it's war, whether it's climate change, terrorism, global economic recession, or whether it is prejudice and racism and gender inequality and the way we treat each other as human beings and all the array of prejudices that we see. Now, as I said before, justice is a very, very broad topic. One way of thinking of it is like a multifaceted gem. So today, what I propose to do is to highlight just a few facets of this gem that I, as an individual, have discovered through my study of the Baha'i writings, and share with you some thoughts I have on concrete, practicable, and effective ways in which each of us can go about applying this principle of justice in our day-to-day lives. And also at the end, I'm going to touch on one aspect of what we can do in our collective lives. There is no better place to begin than with this quote that those of you who may be Baha'is will be very familiar with. And sometimes we're in danger when something is very familiar to us to kind of taking it for granted and missing a whole number of potential meanings that it has. So here's the quote. It's from the Prophet, founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, and it says, it actually starts with the words, "O son of spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice." And it goes on to say, by its aid, thou shalt see with thine own eyes and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. So this immediately sparks two thoughts about practical things that arise from this. So the first very practical thing that we could do in our day-to-day lives is to refrain from backbiting and gossip. Let's define terms first. So backbiting is really the malicious talk about someone who's absent, when we deliberately set about really stabbing someone in the back, if you like, by talking behind their backs. The second, gossip, is really more casual and unconstrained talk in which we report details of someone's life without regard to whether they're true or not. So we don't actually check to see if the rumors we're spreading have any basis on truth. The problem with both of these activities is that they blind us from seeing the truth of who the person is, and they unwittingly cause us to judge others. So have you ever been in a situation where you're about to meet somebody, somebody's going to move into your community or into your workplace or into your school, and you sit amongst people and you say, so what do you know about this person, right? And immediately people start filling the vacuum. Oh, well, I heard this, that, and the other about them, or, oh, yes, I knew this person 20 years ago. And the problem with backbiting and gossip is that sometimes it's not even overt words. As one of my teachers many decades ago used to say, you know, you could sit and say, oh, yes, Tim. Yeah, I know Tim. Yeah, Tim is a nice person. You know, your tone of voice, the look on your face can convey a lot about what you really think about Tim. And the problem with it is the following: it then influences the other person. And now when they meet Tim, they have everything you've said in the back of their mind, and it's impossible to dislodge. A very wonderful person that I knew years ago had this to share about backbiting and gossip, and it stuck with me from childhood all these years. He said a good way to think about it is to imagine a beautiful well of clear spring water, or a beautiful reservoir of clear water that we rely on, say in our village or in our town, for drinking. He said all it takes is to put one drop of poison into that well, no matter how large the reservoir of water is, and now you've poisoned all of it. You can't drink any of it. This is exactly what happens with our minds and thoughts when we introduce any element of gossip or backbiting. And it really is extremely unfair and unjust to the other person when we sully and poison the water of people's minds with idle gossip and with backbiting. We contaminate the view of the person. You know, this is why, even in a court of law, at least here, I don't know what it's like in India and in the other countries where you folks may come from, but in the United States and in Britain, in common law jurisdictions, if a jury is about to hear evidence that is considered unduly prejudicial because it's taken out of context, it can be grounds for a mistrial. So it's recognized even within the law that we have to be very careful what you say about people. And unless the matter is directly related to the crime or the problem that we're talking about, if you raise something else that this person has done in their past that may be horrible and heinous but unrelated, that is deemed, even in a court of law, to be unacceptable and either has to be struck from the record or you get a mistrial as a result. So then the question becomes, and for those of you who are raising hands, if you don't mind, what I'm going to do is I will go through my presentation and then I'll happily try to respond to any comments or suggestions you have. So I see you. So what should we do, right? When somebody around us is engaging in backbiting and gossiping? Now, many of us reach for saying, well, I didn't participate when my friends sat and were engaged in character assassination of our mutual friend or colleague. I was good. I didn't say anything. But is it enough just to withdraw, either to walk away or not participate? And honestly, based on the Baha'i writings, the answer is no. Because by not actually intervening, it's like condoning the action. And again, I want to draw on my experience in the law. You know, if you stand by and watch a group of men hack somebody else to death, you also have responsibility under the law because you didn't step in to intervene or to call for help. And the same is true here. We cannot just refrain from speaking and we cannot withdraw. So what is the advice given? And I find this advice beautiful and uplifting and very interesting. We are urged to speak up. So if people in your group start to backbite or gossip, we are urged to say something along the following lines. How is this conversation helping to advance the interests of this community we're in? Such a powerful question. So what are we doing? By inserting this question in the middle of that backbiting or gossip, we're interrupting the pattern and we're giving the people involved the opportunity to change course. Now, we fully understand that they may choose not to change course, but that's their free will choice. We have done our bit. We have exercised our responsibility. Now, the second thing that arises from that hidden word that we saw is this other thing that each of us can do in our lives, is to learn to investigate truth for ourselves, unbound and unfettered by preconceptions and biases. So this happens in several spheres. So let's start again with getting to know the person. We want to get to know somebody new. How do we do it? We see with our own eyes and not through the eyes of others. In other words, we wait, we don't ask other people about them in advance. We wait to meet them, we get to know them, and we judge based on the interactions that we have with the other person. When we encounter a new set of beliefs or a new faith, again, it behooves us to explore them with an open mind, unfettered by prejudice, to see, do these ideas resonate with our inmost heart and spirit? It really doesn't matter what our friends or family or colleagues think, because our faith cannot be conditioned by that of another. We're each individually responsible for the progress of our own soul. Unfortunately, again, we live in a world where we have been in the habit of abdicating the responsibility for investigating truth to people whom we call clergy, and we have it in all faiths. Fortunately, in the Baha'i faith, this has been removed. We don't have clergy in the Baha'i faith. Individuals don't have authority. As I speak to you today, I have zero authority. All I can humbly share with you is my individual thoughts and my personal understanding of the Baha'i writings based on my very limited belief, because we all have filters that limit our beliefs and that skew the way that we understand things. So I'm coming to you with all my skewed impressions, but sharing with you. So we need to cultivate a new habit. When we go to elect people who are to lead our communities and to create environments in which we can all actualize our potentials, again, we have to exercise this wonderful principle, not to be biased by their promises, by their platforms, by what other people say, by what the media says. What do we do instead? We look with the discerning eye to see, what are their qualities? Has this person been honest in his or her individual life? Have they been honest and faithful to their spouse, or have they cheated on their spouse? Have they been honest in their business dealings, or have they cheated in their business dealings? And thank goodness in today's internet world, it's very easy to learn these things about a person. Are they upright or corrupt? Have they demonstrated selfless service over the course of years? Or has it all been about their ego and getting power and getting material gain? Are they free from prejudice? Are they unifiers or are they dividers? What has their record of service been like? This is how we investigate truth before we set out to vote for fit leaders in our society. Judging what we hear in the media. We all know that the media is biased. All the media, unfortunately, everywhere in the world, it's a question of degree, but they're more or less biased because they're in the hands of vested interests, and it's really become more of a business. So what do? Well, one thing that I have chosen to do is I don't listen to any one source of news or read one paper. I usually get a smattering of news from different countries, you know, France and Britain and other countries, and in the United States, the right and the left. And I figured that somewhere in the middle of all this mess lies the kernel of truth, right? So we can get into the habit just of being conscious and being aware, so that we're not unwittingly manipulated by people, so that when we take decisions, we take informed decisions. Now, another facet of justice is that justice demands universal participation. It has now become a well-established fact, backed by a lot of studies, that the greater the diversity of backgrounds, even in business, the better the decisions made in the business. Interestingly, the faster the decisions made in a business. You wouldn't think so, but it's true. And the more successful a business is, literally in terms of the bottom line, in terms of the amount of money that you can make. So the idea of actively inviting diversity in input at all levels of decision-making is something that is both an act of fairness and justice, because we're allowing all voices to be heard. We're not marginalizing any voices, especially based on prejudices, whether it's ethnic or national or gender or so on. and we benefit from it. So how wonderful. Now, one way to think about this, and it ties into the second expression of justice, that consultation is a practical expression of justice. This is, again, another teaching actually from the Baha'i writings. And I love the way it's articulated, because it's when you sit and you reflect on it, it's so true. By inviting diverse people, so first of all, universal participation, and then inviting those people, that diverse group of people now, to engage in something called consultation, we are expressing justice. Now, how so? Again, an analogy here serves really well. If we think about truth as a multifaceted gem, and we were talking about justice as a multifaceted gem, depending on where you're standing, you're going to see one of the facets of this gem. If I'm standing here, I may look at the gem and see blue. If someone standing on the other side may see pink, somebody on the other side may see yellow. Now, we could be very stubborn and say this gem is blue or red or yellow. But if we're wise, we will step into each other's shoes, move around and say, oh, wow, yes, I see that depending on the context or the circumstance or the way the light hits the gem, it could be any and all of these colors. So what's happened now is by consulting with each other and seeking the diverse viewpoints, we've enhanced our collective understanding. And this is the benefit of consultation. And by having this enhanced understanding, we are therefore in a position to take decisions that are more fair and just in this world. Again, our habit in the world today is not that. It's quite the opposite. It's to seek out homogeneous groups like ourselves and to speak and to make decisions in silos. And this is what has led to the polarization and the extremism in our world that is leading to violence and wars. So we're talking about applications of justice at a very grassroots level, because once you remove these weeds, then the flowers of justice can grow in the garden. Now, when Baha'is talk about consultation, by the way, they mean something very specific. So when you're in a group, the idea is that you offer a suggestion. And once you offer it, the suggestion becomes that of the group. You then detach your ego from it and you let go of the suggestion, because the goal is to seek the truth that benefits the entire group. And that truth comes about as a result of the clash of the various opinions. And we need to be detached enough so that when that spark of truth arises, we recognize it. All right. The next idea, justice demands the exercise of moderation. It's a really interesting idea. And again, it comes from Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, who says the following. He says, whoso cleaveth to justice can under no circumstances transgress the limits of moderation. Now, what I find fascinating about this quote is just a sentence later, this is what he says, and I want you to listen carefully, because we're going to look and see how it directly applies to one of the biggest challenges that humanity faces today. He says, the civilization so often vaunted by the learned exponents of arts and sciences will, if allowed to overleap the bounds of moderation, bring great evil upon men. So he says, civilization, though wonderful, can bring great evil on us if we allow it to exceed the bounds of moderation. And in order to, in case we're worried that we've misunderstood him, he puts it differently. He says, if carried to excess, civilization will prove as prolific a source of evil as it had been of goodness when kept within the restraints of moderation. And then he urges us to meditate on this. So let's look at one of the biggest challenges of our world today, climate change. How did it come about? Through excesses of civilization. We have mindlessly been consuming and ravaging our earth, consuming resources, and burning fossil fuels as though there is no tomorrow. And we're now in a state that in which injustice and unfairness are so rampant. Is it fair that some nations that are island nations should entirely disappear off the face of the planet? And these people be left with absolutely nothing, while others in other parts of the world who benefited from the burning of fossil fuels be allowed to thrive? I recently read an article about something that's happening in my own backyard, sort of, in this country. And I want to share with you, sort of, it demonstrates the evils of this excess in a microcosm. So there's a famous city in Utah called Salt Lake City, which has a very famous salt lake. Apparently the salt lake, because of climate change, has been drying up. So it is now a third of the size it was 30 years ago. And the pictures are really frightening. So you say, so what's the problem here? Okay, so this lake is drying up and the concentrations of salt are rising. As a result, the algae is dying off. The algae supports the shrimp that live there. The shrimp support 10 million migratory birds that pass through every year. So within a few months, they anticipate by the end of the summer already, this lake may have dried up. So what happens then, in addition, is there's no water for the homes and the farms. And once this lake completely dries up, the dust will start getting blown around. That dust contains high levels of arsenic and other heavy metals that cause severe lung problems and lung cancer and lung disease and will kill people. So they were talking about this being a nuclear environmental bomb. And this is happening in many, 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 many parts of the world. In Siberia, the permafrost is melting. What is the problem with that? The permafrost contains vast amounts of methane, which is one of the worst forms of gases that greenhouse gases that will exacerbate global warming and climate change. So it's like a time bomb ready to go off. In India, we read in the news about your trials and tribulations with climate change, ranging from lack of water and drought and food shortages. You have had to stop export of wheat to the rest of the world right at a time when the war in Ukraine is going on, and 33% of the world's wheat supplies are no longer available because they come from Ukraine. And now the wheat from India is no longer available. You have all your pollution problems, the fact that you have to close things down for certain days during the week. Schools and cars are banned from traveling, and factories have to close for periods of time just in order to keep pollution levels at a level where y'all can just breathe and live. This is a talk about unfairness and injustice and a crazy situation to be in. All right, now let's go on to the next thing. Justice, as defined in one part of the Baha'i writings, is giving somebody what is rightly their due. Now, this sounds easy enough, but when you stop and think about it, it's very, very hard to implement. And I wanted to share with you an example, and we may want to discuss this in our when we get to talk in just a couple of minutes. Let's say you have two very hungry children who come, and you have a loaf of bread. And they both come and say, oh, Auntie, I'm hungry, please give me bread. And you think, okay, how do I divide this bread amongst these two children? So our natural inclination would be to say, okay, I have two hungry children. I divide this loaf in half and give half to this one and half to that one. But what if one of these children comes from a poor family, has not eaten a proper meal in 2 months, is very hungry and emaciated? The other one comes from a well-to-do family, has had a hearty breakfast, and now is waiting for his or her lunch and is just saying, I'm hungry, but is well-fed. Now, is it still just and fair to divide that loaf in half and give half to this and half to that? Maybe justice dictates that the whole loaf should go to the very hungry child. So you see how now dispensing justice becomes a tricky business. Means it's something that both in our individual lives, we have to think carefully, be very thoughtful, to look behind the obvious, to investigate truth again. You see how all of these aspects of justice interrelate, to find out what is the context that I'm looking at before I try to be fair in the way I treat people. It's true with businesses too. So if two people do the same work, is it actually fair to give them the same amount of money if one of the employees always goes the extra mile, always puts in extra hours, is willing to come in on the weekends, whose quality of work far exceeds the other because they pay attention to detail? Is it fair that they should receive the same pay for the same job description as the other? What about the work done by women in society that is not valued, not recognized, and not paid for? All the untold hours and days of relentless cleaning and cooking and washing and taking care of children, that if we had to farm out, we would have to pay vast sums of money. We did this calculation in our own household about what it would cost if we were, when we were raising our child, it would cost to get a person to do all the work that the one of us would have to do if we stayed home. And it was surprisingly a good fraction of our salary. So, but most women are never valued in that way. They're not acknowledged in that day and are completely taken for granted. So again, is that really just or not? As something I just want to touch on is the roles of vengeance and forgiveness in the application of justice. You know, when we talk about justice, we talk about, we think about law and doing the right thing and holding people to account for a wrong they've done. Even that facet of things is really interesting from the Baha'i vantage point, and I just want to give you an insight. There are two things that we're urged to look at. My response as an individual when somebody's committed a wrong. So if somebody breaks into my home and murders, say, God forbid, my sister or so on, as an individual, I am urged by the Baha'i writings to forgive that person and not to take revenge, because the act of taking revenge is as bad as the act that the person committed. However, this does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that this person has to get away with what they've done. Society has the obligation to bring that person to justice, not as an act of vengeance, but as an act of deterrence, and in order to send a message to other would-be perpetrators not to engage in similar acts, because otherwise we destroy the foundations of society, the foundations of order are destroyed, and we end up in communities that are chaotic. Now, that's what I wanted to focus on. The other aspect is, and now this is another twist here. If somebody were to attack me, I should immediately forgive them. If somebody were to break into my home and try to massacre my family, I should take up arms or whatever is necessary to defend my family. I should do everything in my power to speak up for somebody else who is being wronged. Otherwise, we're condoning bad behavior, and we are the son of the Prophet, founder of the Baha'i faith, Abdul Baha, who was also his successor, says that would be oppression. And in fact, he gives an example. He says, if somebody were to attack me here right now, I would forgive them. But if somebody were to attack, and he names the person next to him, this person, I would be the first person to stand up and to protect him and to defend him. Or he says, if an armed bandit were to come into this room and try to kill all of you, I would be the first person to stand up and defend you. So you see how beautifully balanced it is. The last thing, this is the last thought that I want to share. At the collective level, given what's going on in our world today, I want to point out the absolute necessity for creating systems, societal and even global systems that ensure that justice is done. We simply cannot live in a world where one individual, one leader, or any group of leaders is allowed to completely derail the peace of the world and the equilibrium of the world through aggressive behavior. The war that we're seeing in Ukraine has resulted in the absolute turning over of the world order. It has created an unprecedented global food crisis. As I said, 33% of the world's wheat, 20% of the world's barley, and 23% of the world's corn is not being received. Prices of the staple that is bread for so many poor people in the world has shot up, and they now are going to go hungry. The United Nations estimates that at least 15 million people this year alone will go hungry, will starve, just because of lack of wheat from Ukraine. And now, as I said, India can no longer export wheat because of climate change. And so we're starting to see this domino effect. In addition, fertilizer is stuck in Ukraine, and 40% of the world's fertilizer cannot find its way to where it needs to be. So crop yields are nowhere at the level they need to be around the world. This is an absolute crisis. You know, we can live without a lot of things, but not without food and fresh water. It's also triggered a global energy crisis. Prices have shot up, and we all know what the problem is. I'm not going to belabor it. It's also triggered a global economic recession, high inflation everywhere. It's skyrocketing. And now the World Bank and the OECD have come out with reports that the entire world is going to slow down drastically in its growth, in its predicted growth. The war has also put us at threat for another world war. And even if not a world war, a threat of a limited nuclear war. Do you know that even if we had a limited nuclear war, experts predict that even if we had a war that lasted like less than a day in a very limited geographic area, by the way, even if this happened on the border, they did this study apropos of your border, of the Kashmir border with Pakistan, that it would result in 10 years of no summer around the world, no crop yields, and guess how many people would starve? 2 billion. 2 billion of the world's population would starve. So talk about injustice. And for us to stand by as a global community and have a system where we cannot stand up to the aggression and the injustice meted out by one individual is just unthinkable. So Baha'u'llah envisioned such a scenario in advance and said that the world should come together, the world's leaders, and agree to set up a system of collective security, agree that all nations would reduce their arms to the amount necessary to preserve order within their borders, and that after that, any nation that starts to amass arms or that starts to become an aggressor, all the nations would agree as a whole to arise against that one nation, bring it to heel immediately, as soon as the problem arises, before we get the kind of problem we had in Syria and then have now in Ukraine, and we had in Yemen, and we have in Tigray, and on and on and on. How many millions of people's lives are being decimated? All right, so that is the end of my presentation. As Dr. Mishra said, if you enjoyed what you heard, you can learn more. I've covered these topics in a couple of my books that I've listed: The Alchemy of Peace and Building a World Federation, the Key to Resolving Our Global Crises. I don't know if you folks get Amazon in your part of the world, but if you do, it will be available there. If not, feel free to get in touch with me, and I can happily arrange for books to be shipped to you. All right, well, thank you so much, and we can move on. I can stop sharing my screen. And
Thank you so much, Madam Sohaida, for sharing your thoughts and insights on the subject. I'm very grateful that you have kept it limited to the individual actions and steps that friends can understand the ideas and not have taken up about the reforms in the United Nations and all those things, because I personally do not think that they will be very much helpful for us as individuals to think about. The small steps that individuals can take in their lives, that will go a long way, change scenarios in our neighborhood, in our family, uh, in the surroundings that we live in. Anyway, friends, I believe at the heart of the subject, there is a need for us to understand that humanity is one. We are all created from one common source. Unless we develop a consciousness that the same principles and standards should be applicable for everyone, it will be very difficult to observe fair-mindedness. How do we raise ourselves to such level of maturity and consciousness, truly believing that we are all one? We believe that the only way we can advance towards this level of maturity is to immerse ourselves in the ocean of the words of God that are available to us through different messengers of God that appear from time to time for our regeneration. So that is why our programs, we always read and introspect on some of the relevant passages that we extract from the Holy Text. Now I will request Dr. Kazim is there. Dr. Kazim is there. So I will request to read the motivational course. The first part will be read by Dr. Kazim, and the second part will be read by Dr. Merchant. So can I request Dr. Kazim to unmute and start reading?
Dr. Mishra, when you say first part, it goes how many
Yes,
of them?
the two of them, from the Bhagavad Gita
Yeah.
and from Holy Quran.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. So these are extracts from the Bhagavad Gita. Whenever Dharma declines and the purpose of life is forgotten, I manifest myself on earth. I am born in every age to protect the good, to destroy evil, and to re-establish Dharma. To protect the righteous, God is seated in the hearts of his devotees and always protects them from within. To annihilate the wicked, God is all-powerful and can kill the wicked merely by wishing it. To establish Dharma, God can establish it through a saint, so he does not need to descend himself in his personal form to accomplish this. It is a sin to commit injustice, but it is a greater sin to tolerate injustice. If you refuse to fight this righteous war, abandoning your social duty, you will certainly incur sin. Now, extracts from the Holy Quran. My Lord hath commanded justice. God commands justice and fair dealing. Stand up firmly for justice as a witness to God, even as against yourselves or your parents or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor. Act against those who oppress people and transgress against the justice. They will have an agonizing punishment. Though if a person is patient and forgives, this is one of the greatest things. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice. Witnesses for God, even if it be against yourselves or parents or relatives, whether one is rich or poor, God is worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just.
Thank you. Dr. Merchant, please.
Yes, yeah, kindly raise the screen. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Extracts from the Holy Bible. So you will need to adjust the screen, otherwise I'll have to open mine.
Adib, can you please make it higher?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Extract from the Holy Bible. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Correct oppression. Bring justice to the fatherless and please the widow's cause. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you. He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. Extracts from the writings of the Buddha. To adjust the screen. The most precious treasure is virtue. If there is one righteous person, the rain falls for his sake. Destroy the man of wicked thoughts. If one doth act in friendly wise, with no evil thoughts toward any single creature, and in so doing becometh proper, and if he has compassion in his soul toward all living beings, this noble one doth acquire abundant virtue. Just as treasures are uncovered from the earth, so virtue appears from good deeds, and wisdom appears from a pure and peaceful mind. To walk safely through the maze of human life, one needs the light of wisdom and the guidance of virtue. Extracts from the Baha'i writings. The light of men is justice. Quench it not with the contrary winds of oppression and tyranny. The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among people. In this exalted word, the sea of God's wisdom is moving. All the books of the world are not sufficient to contain its interpretation. The best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not, that I may confide in thee. By its aid, thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behoveth thee to be. Cleave ye to justice and fairness, and turn away from the whisperings of the foolish, them that are estranged from God, that have decked their hands with the ornament of the learned, and have condemned to death him who is the fountain of wisdom. When perfect justice reigns in every country of the Eastern and Western world, then will the earth become a place of beauty. The dignity and equality of every servant of God will be acknowledged. The ideal of the solidarity of the human race, the true brotherhood of man, will be realized. And the glorious light of the Sun of Truth will illumine the souls of all men. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Merchant and Dr. Kazem. I hope these holy writings have inspired us to walk the straight path, to follow the divine teachings prescribed by the various messengers of God. Okay, dear friends, I request all of you to switch on your videos. We will take a group photograph. Thank you. Thank you. Is this done, Adib? Mr. Parida, is this done?
Yes, it's done.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now I request, we have Madam Veena with us, who is going to sing a song for us before we proceed ahead. She has promised us to sing on the theme of justice. So let's hear from her. Please unmute. Can you?
Yes. Okay, I am unmuted. Sorry. This is from the Hidden Words, Persian Hidden Words, number 4. O son of justice, whither can a lover go but to the land of his beloved? And what seeker findeth rest away from his heart's desire? To the true lover, reunion is life. To the true lover, separation is death. His breast is void of patience, and his heart hath no peace. A myriad lights he would forsake to hasten to the abode of his beloved.
Thank you so much for your beautiful renditions. Thank you so much. Okay, dear friends, before we keep the floor open for the friends to comment, I wanted to request all of you to actively participate in the discussion and to share your comments. If you have a question to ask, you can ask. Before I keep the floor open, I was thinking that Madam Subaida was talking about the balance between equity, equality, and need. And she was giving an example of distribution of something between two. I fail to remember that. I'm asking this because I remember during my research time, I had a conversation with several professors who were my guides. In the academic world, there is still no consensus how the justice will prevail between equity, the one who is contributing, and equality, which we expect that everyone should be equal. And the third is the need of the person. So how the principle of justice will maintain balance between these three elements or aspects of justice, what we may call it. Do you have any thoughts about it?
You asking me or you asking?
Yes.
Well, so it begins by, I think the process starts by raising awareness that these are all things that need to be considered. So one of the things that's clear from the Baha'i writings, which are really my guide as I go forward, and obviously these are not questions that I have complete answers to, nobody does, because we need to arrive at answers through the process of consultation that we talked about, right? But the starting point is that equality and or equity do not mean sameness. And I think this was the point that I was trying to make, and this is the point that Abdul Baha was trying to make, that And that's why communism ultimately didn't work, because it tried to focus on the idea of sameness. Everybody lived in exactly the same kind of home with you got the same kind of food and you got the same salary no matter what you did. And that idea of sameness really ultimately dulls the human spirit, because it's unfair. Because if I choose to work 20 hours a day, and be amazingly productive and create and invent things that save the lives of millions of people, it would be unfair to compensate me in the same way that somebody else is compensated for, I don't know, sitting and typing all day long. So, and people also need to have an incentive. So you have to take all of these things into consideration. And all I can say is that all these things need to be taken into account, all these factors considered by representatives of all people of diverse backgrounds, in order that we can arrive at answers that highlight basically the truth that is to the highest benefit, the highest good of the highest number of people. So there is no kind of formulaic answer. I'd be curious to hear what others have to say and what their insights and thoughts are.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. Now I keep the floor open. Please show your hands if you have any comments to make, if you have a question to ask or any observations. We'll be happy to unmute you and you can share your views.
Well, I'd like to request permission, since no one has. So friends, yeah, it was so brilliant and wonderful listening to Dr. Soheda. Justice, fairness, equity, these are very profound and loaded words when you look at the society today. But at a personal level, I think a father and mother and a few children in a home, if they start learning to practice justice and fairness among themselves, then I think that would be a great beginning to understand the profound concepts. So a family, a family of 4 persons, generally that's the size of the family these days. And so how a father or a mother has been just towards the children and how the children reciprocate, or the husband and wife, the reciprocal. So there is also an element of reciprocity. When I know that at the personal level, we are governed by love and forgiveness, that will strengthen our bonds of friendship. But for the society and the nation state, you need justice and the rule of law. So perhaps you could throw up some light on how this rule of law doesn't take effect because the foundation of justice is missing. What have you to say, Professor Soheda?
I was last night I was reading something from Abdul Baha in which he says, and I'm trying to see if I have it, he says the pole of the canopy of the world is built upon the pole of justice, not the pole of forgiveness, which I found very interesting. So forgiveness is something that governs in our individual lives, but he says the entire order of the world will be destroyed if we don't have this pole of justice firmly established. Now, apropos of that, again, bringing it back to make it very practical in our individual lives, I came across this story, which I found really interesting. Again, Abdul Baha, he's our perfect exemplar for Baha'is, and the role modeling he does is what we look at. So Abdul Baha made it very clear that, for instance, even in our daily lives, we should not allow anyone to take unfair advantage of us. And the story is that somebody had wanted to charge him. This is separate from the cab driver's story where the guy grabs him by the sash and shakes him. There's another story of him also being with a cab driver who tries to cheat him. And Abdu'l-Baha says, absolutely not. And then he turns to the people there and he says, an individual can choose to give $1,000 away. And that's fine if that's their choice. But that individual must not allow somebody to take even $1 away from them if it's done without their permission, because that it would be allowing this person to take unfair advantage. And by doing so, we condone that behavior. And then he says, and if that happens, the entire basis of the foundation of order in the world and justice would be overturned. How very, very interesting, right? Because I think sometimes we get confused. People do things that are wrong and we say, oh, poor thing, you know, he's poor or she's this, or and we let them get away with stuff. We have to be very wise and recognize, yes, if somebody, it's not that we are standing up, that we're being vengeful because of the harm they did to us. We're told to forgive. However, we also have to be very clear that we have to be not to encourage people in behavior that then upsets the order of the world. So that again is a very fine balance, right? Imagine if everybody were to do that, to be very clear on our boundaries of nobility and dignity, really is the way I view it, to say no, thus far and no further. If you want, ask me and I will give you, but don't try to take unfair advantage of me, because I'm not going to allow that, because that is not good for me or the community or the society at large. And I very much appreciate what you said about the family. You know, the Universal House of Justice, the governing body of the Baha'i faith, had pointed out that these habits start with the family. Habits start at home. We carry them from the home to work life, from work life to governance. And so, yes, all of these habits start at home. And again, I'm struck by the fact that Abdu'l-Baha tells us that within a family, each person has rights, and that the rights of all members of the family need to be upheld and preserved. So again, it behooves us to sit down and think about, well, what are those rights? Because until we figure out what they are, we can't uphold them. So what does it mean in my family that my spouse and I have individual rights, and our daughter, we have one child, has rights? What does that look like? So that we can all be very cognizant and aware. So I see wonderful two people whose hands are up.
Thank you. There are two friends, I can see the hands. Mr. Parida first, and then we go to Madam Christian.
Can we say that justice related to talent? Because we see, suppose movie actors and sportsmen, they use crores of rupees. And some common people, even educationists also, they cannot earn that much. So how we can, so to say, justify this thing?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, or somebody repeat it? I had trouble hearing it.
No, I am telling, just suppose one sportsman who are talented and any film actor, they are earning crores of rupees. And in some persons, there are in some education field also, they don't earn that much. How can we justify? Both are talented. How do we justify these things? Are we doing justice to these people?
That's a really good question. You've touched on a really sensitive point. So really, we have to go back and ask ourselves about the value, prioritization of values to society. You know, what does what a sports person does provide as much value to the upliftment and the betterment and the elevation of human society as someone who, say, is in the field of education or a doctor? In my personal view is that we have all our values topsy-turvy. For years, I've been saying it's crazy to me that we worship our celebrities. Okay, they can sing well, it's wonderful, they make us happy, they can act, they look beautiful, fantastic, or they can kick a ball well and or get a tiny ball into a tiny hole on a golf course, fantastic. But really, when we compare that to the work of a teacher or a nurse or a doctor or an educator, really, who I know in the United States do not get paid. I mean, the educators get paid a pittance, nurses get paid a pittance. We saw this during the pandemic. We saw how undervalued our nurses were and how desperately we needed them. We really need to reconsider. You know, unfortunately, most of our decisions in life today are driven by materialistic considerations, the bottom line. It's all about money. Everything's become a business. Even our media has become a business. It's not about mirroring the truth to the world so that we can be well informed. It's about entertainment. I was struck a few months ago when one of our famous hosts on a famous, it was Fox Television. I mean, this was all in the news, so this is nothing that to keep hidden. He was asked, he had come forward and said, here's the truth of what happened, you know, on January 6th. And he was asked, why don't you say this on your news show? It would be so helpful if somebody like you, who has so many tens of millions of followers, were to say this. And he looked and he said, you straight face, oh, I'm not on my news program in order to tell the truth. That's not what my audience wants from me. I'm there to entertain. My audience would be very disappointed and my reputation would be completely ruined amongst my followers if I were to speak the truth. That's not the business I am in. And I thought, aha, there you have it. A moment of honesty where we, you know, but unfortunately people miss that. But he literally said it, and he's on record as having said it. So this is the problem. It's the materialism that drives, you know. His ratings would go down and they would lose money and he would be out of a job. It's as simple as that. So we have to set things on a different footing. And that's why, in my humble opinion, things start at the grassroots. You know, I know, Dr. Mishra, you say that the collective stuff is not something practical. I must respectfully disagree with you. We are not going to create a just world in which war ends if we as individuals don't raise our own consciousness and understand that we need to start creating new systems, including the system of collective security. And how do we make a difference? We make the difference by starting to have these conversations with each other. At work, at the water cooler, at the coffee shop, on the bus, in the cab, in the rickshaw, wherever we are, with the grocery store, raising awareness, sowing these seeds. Why? Because once enough people have these ideas in their head, they will then demand that their leaders implement these ideas. You know, some people believe in the top-down approach. My personal view is the top-down approach, those days are gone. We had an opportunity, and I don't think that we're in a place anymore where top-down works, but that's great. Let's do it from both ends, top-down, but grassroots up. It's really important. So, yeah. Mahmoud.
Thank you very much. I go to Madam Kristen.
Yes. Hello. First of all, it's a great pleasure, Soveda, to meet you after several decades. And thanks to Dr. Jiten, we have this opportunity to hear you and to hear this brilliant presentation. So first of all, thank you very much. Secondly, I just want to, well, you already reply in a certain way. My main questions, or probably the question of many of us, is that of course in our own life we have an impact on trying to put in practice to be more just, if it is with our children, in our family, in our surrounding. at work or if we have employees, etc. So this is something that we try to do it in our own life, but always is the question of how we can have this same impact on the society. You talk about awareness, this is certainly true, but how can we have more, I will say, impact? We are all surrounded by injustice, not only in India, but all over the world, which is, of course, a big sadness for each one of us. So how awareness, of course, but can we have a more impact, or what is your view? If you can develop that, how we can have more an impact on this injustice which is around us.
So my own private thoughts on this is that we have to proceed, because we're running out of time, on several fronts. So I've addressed one, which is the most basic that everybody can do, no matter their circumstances. As you alluded, regardless of our environment, wherever we are with our colleagues, et cetera, having these conversations and elevating awareness. A second one that I have found very effective is to find like-minded organizations and people and reach out and collaborate with them, because then you start to get the force of numbers. And we're seeing this play out really well, like here in our neighborhood. We had, we've had this wave of conferences around the world, and in Washington, DC, we had a citywide conference, and then 8 of our neighborhoods, each of them had their own localized conference. And in our localized conference, we chose to just focus on one of the 5 themes, which was social transformation. It was a 3-hour conference. We held it at a coffee shop. And we had about, 40 friends attending, but many of them from the wider community. And one of the beautiful things that we tried to focus on, and that turned out really well, was to try to identify a whole set of organizations that all these people were engaged with, so that we could then reach out to them and say to them, we want to stand in solidarity with you, stand shoulder to shoulder in order to tackle injustice, whether the injustice was homelessness, whether the injustice is, we have the black-white racism in this country. And then, as it turned out, a gentleman an African-American gentleman who's running for office in the city to be on our council, the city council, happened to knock on our doors, the doors of one of the Baha'is in the neighborhood, like a week before. We just said prayers, and he said, he was coming to canvass. So of course the Baha'i said, well, actually we're Baha'is, we don't engage in partisan stuff, but here's what we do. And he was fascinated. So he came in and he said, can I sit down and say some prayers with you? And then he showed up to the conference, and he's now taking what the Baha'is are doing and trying to find organizations for us that we can partner with. So partnering with organizations is absolutely critical. Those are the 2 ideas. A third initiative that our national governing body is doing, which is really exciting, which is also proven very effective, it is proving effective, that I'll share with you, is something called Meaningful Conversations. So about 2 years ago, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, our national governing body, elected body for those of you who are new to the faith, started a pilot program in which they have a national team that creates Facebook ads and ads on Meetup and Eventbrite. And they invite people to have meaningful conversations. The way the meaningful conversations is carried out, and they have them right now, it's in 30 different cities around the country. So every Friday night in 30 cities around the United States, there are these conversations that take place. The people who come, you don't know who's going to show up every Friday night, because they're people who are self-selected, who have responded to Facebook ads that say, please join us for a meaningful conversation. And we're very open about the fact that we're going to be using Baha'i quotations as the launching pad for the conversations. Every Friday has a theme. And the themes, it's a wide array of themes, from spiritual, personal, to societal transformation, to everything under the sun. I'm part of the core team for Washington, DC, and it's been absolutely phenomenal, because, we often have about 20 people. on Fridays, but every Friday we get 5 or 6 new people. And then these people become our friends, and we start meeting them outside the meaningful conversation. Those who are interested, we get to know them, they become friends, they start participating in joint activities. We get to know the organizations they're involved in, we get to know them and their backgrounds, and we stand shoulder to shoulder and we start doing work. It's really been, I mean, I must say, I'm always so excited. I can't go to bed on Friday nights because I'm so jazzed from the interactions. And people come from all, people do what you did today, Dr. Mishra. They say, oh, my guru says this, that, and the other, or from the Islamic teachings say this, or my Christian teachings say that, or I'm an agnostic and atheist, but we all come together because we want to build a better world, and we're forging these amazing bonds and relationships. And so we're creating all these nuclei, and the nuclei are broadening and broadening. So those are the 3 thoughts that I have to share. Other than that, I'm curious to know, I know that there are others of you here on this call who are very active and doing wonderful work. So it'd be wonderful to hear from you and to get your ideas out.
Thank you so much. Now I go to Mr. Mahmoud Samandari.
Thank you very much. And Soveda, also great to see you and benefit from your very interesting talk. You talked about the bottom up, and I think everybody knows or talks about it, but there is an interesting way of understanding how this bottom up process will actually influence the whole society. And for this, I would like to quote the 1st of March message of the Universal House of Justice. It says, every choice a Baha'i makes as employee or employer, producer or consumer, borrower or lender, benefactor or beneficiary leaves a trace. And the moral duty to lead a coherent life demands that one's economic decisions be in accordance with lofty ideals, that the purity of one's aim be matched by the purity of one's actions to fulfill those aims. Now, this is the part of bottom up, but how do they explain that this will influence the whole system? Later in that sentence, it says, in that paragraph, not content with whatever values prevail in the existing order that surrounds them, the friends everywhere should consider the application of the teachings to their lives, and using the opportunities their circumstances offer them, make their own individual and collective contributions to economic justice and social progress wherever they reside. And this last sentence, such efforts will add to a growing storehouse of knowledge in this regard. This is the foundation of the economy of tomorrow, the storehouse of knowledge that individual actions are building. Thank you.
Thank you so much for drawing our attention to that. Thank you so much. Wonderful, dear friends. So we are coming towards the end of the program, the final part of the program, which we call the reading the pledges. We usually summarize what we have learned, what we have heard during the program, and we try to internalize, we try to use them in our individual lives, and we carry it home as a task at hand. Hereafter things will not be the same. Whatever we learn, we'll try to use it, practice it in our individual lives. As Madam Soveda mentioned, we are going to use it, mobilize the public opinion, initiate the meaningful conversations at your workplace with your colleagues, and use those ideas, and that's how it will reach to the governors of society. Okay, so we are going to request Mrs. Gloria Mahanti to read the statement of pledges. Is she here? Let me check. Adi? Okay. Okay, please unmute her and put it on the screen.
We recognize that justice is a powerful force, and no attempt to build a stable and vibrant society can be successful unless it is grounded on the principle of justice. We therefore promise to be fair-minded, desire for others only that which we desire for ourselves, and apply the same standard for others that we apply for ourselves. We acknowledge that the true station of man is lofty, and he can attain that station except through his justice. We recognize that justice is that faculty of human soul which enables him to segregate truth from falsehood. Hence, we promise to reject prejudices of all kinds, observe and know with our own eyes and knowledge, and not through the eyes and knowledge of others. We understand that suppression of information and perpetuation of ignorance are dreadful forms of oppression, as they reinforce prejudices, creating barriers to the oneness of humanity. Since justice demands universal participation, we promise to facilitate diffusion of knowledge, promote capacity building, and consider the rights of everyone in the society while making decisions and taking actions. We acknowledge that the purpose of justice is to ensure unity among people and agree that justice must manifest inherent oneness of human beings. We, therefore, promise that we will not resort to injustice in our interactions, decisions, and actions, nor be indifferent to oppression and human misery, and become active promoters of justice in our individual lives. We are conscious that the kingdom is God, is founded on the principles of equity and justice, and therefore his creation has to operate on the same principle. We therefore promise to support truth and be impartial in our professional dealings, adhere to fair treatment of others, promote unbiased consultation before decision-making, defend and foster unity in our interactions, and by all means obey and promote the teachings of God. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mrs. Gloria, for reading the pledges. If you share your emails, we will share the statement of pledges with you so you can use them in your private life. Friends, we are reaching towards the end of the program, and it is time to summarize what we discussed and what we understood and what we carry home. I refer to the idea of Madam Christine, what she was talking about. How do we, whatever we are discussing, how do we take it to the public forum? How do we reach out to the people? We have started a conversation, as Madam Suwaida was mentioning, of meaningful conversation in the workplaces of few small organizations. They're my friends, and they have requested us to talk to the seniors and to see how it can be possible to promote fairness at the workplace. So we have started that in a very small level, and in case any of you are interested to associate with us, to help us, to assist us, will be very helpful. Or you want to take our help for doing it at your workplace, you can contact us for the same. Now, the conclusions of students' program. We should treat others as we want to get treated ourselves. This was repeated by Madam Suwaida and repeated in all the great religions. This is the crux of justice, one of the major aspects of justice, is to promote the same principles and standards that we wish for ourselves, applicable for women, men, family members, people in the extended neighborhood. And another vital aspect of justice is to, see that the full equality between the sexes are achieved. The denial of such equality will be injustice towards half of the population, which this kind of injustice can be easily carried from the family to the workplace and ultimately to the wider society. Therefore, our fair-mindedness will only promote family unity, love and fellowship in the neighborhood, in our extended family, and spread out gradually to the wider society. As we mentioned earlier, ignorance is the main reason for decline and fall of the people and perpetuation of prejudice, which leads to oppression. Therefore, we must be active in the area of academic and value education wherever we are, whatever professions we are doing. As individuals, we can conduct classes for children, for the young adults, and even for adults, for creating a mindset in them about fair-mindedness and other virtues. We can start in our neighborhood, and it can gradually expand to the other areas. We must ensure that we have people around us have equal access to the information that we just read in the pledge statement. Holistic education, access to information, will not only control, kind of prejudices they have within them, also it will inculcate the responsibilities in them and also enable them to defend their rights. Among the faculties which are required for building a sustainable social order, empathy, sacrifice are the virtues which are very much required. We cannot afford to dismiss these ideals as naive. These faculties must be used to overcome ego, violence, apathy, and greed. We have already seen the miserable result of the materialistic and sophisticated agreements, that are blended with vested interest, greed, and insincere intentions. Let us give these lofty ideals a chance to reform our society and our individual lives. Another aspect of justice that we have discussed is that the interest of individual and the community, they are inextricably linked. We as individuals cannot afford to be independent republics. Justice has to guide our collective deliberation and decision making, and thereby unified efforts and visions can be formed. It is highly illogical and even irresponsible to assume that individual who is the highest creation of God, whose life is distinguished from all other forms of life and his power of intellect, can be a slave to self-interest, a mere economic unit, who has the claim to, who can claim as much resources of the society as much as possible. It is even unthinkable that we as the highest creation of God, with our potential and capacities, are going to inherit a society for our children and for the future generations where human misery and pain is so much rampant, where half of the population, is at the mercy of the other affluent half, and they are receiving aid and assistance from the other half. So where is the way out? The only option left for us is to have a global economic justice which should emerge only from the virtues, ethics, empathy, fairness, and not from the complex technical deliberations with alternative agendas at the back of the mind, which is not possible, and we have seen the result. Therefore, we must understand that justice is not limited. It has universal quality. Its operation must be applied everywhere, the highest, from the highest to the lowest. The rights of all the people must be protected. We can't be using the language of rights and entitlements to justify our greed and self-interest, which has to be restrained by all means for the interest of the society. Our thoughts, judgment, actions must be based on the principle of justice, and we need to evolve to a new kind of cultural or let's say working norms to fulfill the requirements of justice. This kind of consciousness will gradually spread to our extended family, workplace, civil society, and of course to the policy makers in the long run. We must realize that well-being is only possible through justice and generosity, through collaboration and mutual assistance. We know that Our history is replete with stories of oppression, tyranny, and injustices. And let us place that we don't repeat our history. Whatever we have experienced in the past, it doesn't have to define our future. If we decide to, amend our ways and reject our stubbornness, it need not be so. Let us accept that justice is actually a requirement of life that transcends the animal existence. It is a spiritual principle that touches the core of human motivation and responsibility to investigate the truth. We have to reject the traditions of imitation. And most importantly, we have to protect the individuals from becoming the naive victim of propaganda and disinformation. This is only possible when we individuals are active and raise awareness in our individual capacity in our extended neighborhood. Let us assume that justice is an ideal. We should not assume that it is unapproachable. It truly can begin with small steps by treating others equally, promoting universal participation, disseminating knowledge without discrimination, treating women as equal partners, allowing space and facilitating growth of others, and so on. There are many steps we individuals can do to promote justice in our individual level, and which will go a long way. All this can evolve into a rich culture of justice, and gradually it would assume centrality in all individual and collective decisions. Gradually, justice will prove itself, as the most important agency to promote unity in the society. Our justice, our concern for justice can translate into, it can translate our consciousness into the collective will, where we can build fair structures of governance, and the society will benefit from that. It would even protect us from the temptation of personal benefits and to sacrifice for the common good. The justice has to be the ruling principle of human life and society. And this means we have to reject all the concepts and ideas which are born out of ignorance and selfishness. So therefore, we should be. I paraphrase here from the words of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah says, "Be an ornament." Let me read that. Be an ornament to the countenance of truth, a crown to the brow of fidelity, a pillar to the temple of righteousness, and an ensign to the host of justice. He says, the mortal man, why the mortal men were created? They were created from utter nothingness. They stepped into the realm of being, that they should work for the betterment of the society and live together in peace and harmony. This is exactly the message that we should carry home. We assume that our personal decisions have nothing to do with the society, but in reality, they affect the society directly. It is understandable that such a huge change of culture and mindset is no easy task. However, if we contemplate the core purpose of human life, it would be a great help in changing our line of thinking. Once we accept that we are all one and there is only one human species emanated from one common source, bound with the same laws of God, it will be easier for us to make the mental shift from selfishness to fairness, from self-centered ideas to fairness and empathy. We will all then learn not to be indifferent to human misery and work for common well-being. Our moral and mature behavior can only fulfill our aspiration to live in a peaceful world. Let us accept that our life, learning, and our education are of little value if they are not used for the service of the common good. Let us resolve to put aside all the divisive ways, build bridges by not imposing our standards on others, avoid fault finding, reject violence and controversial ideas, view everyone as a potential partner to work with, initiate positive conversations with people based on the ideas that we have learned today in our neighborhood and across the wider society. It is only through raising awareness and meaningful conversations with everyone we can create positive conditions around us for a better society. Let us decide not to complain, but take positive actions without waiting for others to act. Let us work together by even persuading those people who are still stuck in the past. With this note, I thank all of you for joining us today to this discourse. We will come back in a couple of weeks' time with another crucial theme that affects the human life. We request all of you to support this small initiative and publicize it widely, and invite all your friends and contacts and acquaintances to join our program. This is the only way we can raise awareness, build a unifying vision and consciousness, which is so necessary to build a better society. From the core of my heart, I thank Madam Subaida Mani, our keynote speaker today, for her support and kindness and for participation. I thank Dr. Kazem, Dr. Merchant, Mrs. Gloria, and all other dear friends. Please forgive me if I am not able to take your name, for your kind participation, and earnestly request your support. Please forgive me if I have missed anyone's name. Please do leave your contacts in the chat box to communicate with you and to send you invite in the time to come. We pray for your good health, for your happiness. Namaskar and goodbye to all of you, and hope to see you all in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.